All right, good morning world. A little later in the morning today for me. Our friend Darren came over and had a hangout with me, and we got so wrapped up talking about hunting and fishing, we didn't even talk about about his latest trip into the woods. But when it comes to this topic, right? Go figure. But he did tell me of a friend of his who's seen, remember we posted that video a little while ago when he was sitting there, all of a sudden that weird black shadow was in his camera lens in the back out of the tree? Well, his native friend said he saw the exact thing, only what he saw, I guess he was sitting there waiting by a river hunting, and he saw these shadows, more like a shadow, just like what was caught on his camera, moving through the forest, and then went behind a huge cedar tree right across from him, and then the face peeked out, crystal clear, looked at him. Interesting, right? Very interesting. Now, what do we got going on here this morning? I'm here one more. Well, I'm here until later on this afternoon, then I'm out of here. Back on the ocean. So, shall we hear from, this will be the last time we hear from Bobby Short for a little bit. Because I don't take this book anywhere with me, I'll ruin it. And no, the book's not available. Apparently it's going to be available though. But it's not public right now. Alright, here was the next entry below our last reading yesterday. Oh, I got those super long emails too. Shit. I gotta get those people heard. And how long is this gonna be? Alright, I'll just read this one entry here. Edwards Air Force Base, California. An additional piece of mail regarding Edwards Air Force Base. My name is Jay Brooks. I came across the articles about the sightings at Edwards Air Force Base, and my jaw dropped. I never imagined that someone would post the stories, but I'm glad you did. I used to work at Edwards Air Force Base as a contract security police officer from October '88 to March of '93. I grew up in nearby Victorville, California, before entering the Air Force as a security police officer in 1983, nearly 29 to 30 years ago now. I can't even begin to relate to you some of the things still going on out there at the base rocket site or North Base, but your article was right on the nose. The stories are still being told to new people about the sightings when they start to work there, and several people have had Bigfoot sightings recently from keeping in touch with friends still employed there. Thanks for posting the article. I personally feel better after reading it. Also, by chance, did you ever come across eyewitness reports of sightings down by 90th East and Avenue E? I used to live out there and would be very interested to hear of any reports in that area. Jay Brooks, Salem, Oregon. Here you go. Funny how people find relief, right? Relief. Just from somebody else seeing or knowing the same knowledge. Relief. Oh man, it's getting hot in here. I don't know how all of my friends out there who live south, I don't know how you do it in this heat. I don't know how you do it. It's been cooking here for a while. I can't handle it. I don't know how you do it. When I was in Texas one time, Uvalde, Texas, in the springtime, it was 90 degrees at nighttime at 10 o'clock. And my friends were taking me around their hunting property, and I was frickin' dying in that heat. All right. What do we got? Man, I'm sweating in here. I've got to get air conditioning in here. Holy. Man, I'm in a frickin' oven. I'm not into the hotness. What do we got? See if I can make it. It was a pretty big email. Whoops. Oh, I lost it. Come on, idiot. All right, here we go. Sorry, guys. Mark this as read. Strange event atop a Southwest American butte in the memory of my brother. Hi, Steve. Sent this to the wrong email address yesterday. Sorry about that. I don't know if what my eldest brother experienced probably 40 years ago or more had anything to do with the forest people or with some other being with which we share the world. But he passed away in 2013 and will never have the chance to share his story with you. Had he lived to know about your channel and about your efforts to help all the people like him to speak their truths, I think he probably would have shared it. I'm sorry to hear he passed. So, having spent about 1.5 years listening to you, and having been reminded repeatedly as a result of your channel of the evening he told me about it, I finally decided to do it for him. Right on. This is for you, Kurt. Rest in peace, big brother. I only regret that you didn't know how much I loved you, and that I never got to say goodbye to you, that I have forgotten the name of the butte you tried to camp on all those years ago. If the event I'm about to share rings a bell with any of your listeners, Steve, I sure would be grateful to know where this happened, and whether it has happened to anyone else who has ventured there. This is the account my brother told me many years ago, after he had returned from one of several trips he had taken in this little quarter-ton truck, in his little quarter-ton truck. This would have been back in the early 80s sometime, I believe. On these trips, he wandered the Native American lands of the West, getting to know some of the people there, hiking its canyons, rock climbing, and writing music for classical guitar in homage to the experiences he had and to the beautiful parts of America that he saw. He never stayed in hotels, but would stay sometimes with the people he met on his travels, and more often rough camped in a tent using simple supplies that he carried in his truck, alone, enjoying the wilderness, albeit for different purposes, but in much the same way you and all the hunters there on How to Hunt do. I cannot for the life of me remember whether it was the name of the butte where this happened, or of a nearby canyon near which the butte stood, but I know the general area of both the butte and the canyon have a name, and had a name from the local residents. I also know that it was either on or nearby Native American land, somewhere in the Southwest. I want to say in Arizona or New Mexico, but I just can't be certain. And that the native people of the area freely acknowledged that it was inhabited by something unnatural and dangerous. Kurt, who had been in his late 30s at the time, until this event was a very skeptical man concerning anything he himself had not seen. But he also knew that I had had a few unexplainable experiences in my life myself by the time he shared the story with me. And so I guess he felt comfortable telling me about what happened on that trip. I'll always be grateful that he did. He said that he had been spending a few days in this area getting to know the people, learning about the land, and camping wherever he felt he could do so without disturbing its inhabitants. I believe he said he was in some little town getting supplies when he mentioned his intent to camp that night on a small nearby butte, whose plateau was accessible by a rough dirt road. He thought he would drive his truck up there, set up camp, and be treated to an amazing sunrise the next morning. He said the people in town he spoke to about it told him unequivocally that he was crazy and that he should not go there at all, let alone camp up there at night. As was Kurt's typical response to such a ghost story, as he undoubtedly would have characterized such a warning, he asked them why, and listened to the reasons, and politely went on his way with his supplies, heading up to the butte. He arrived at the top of the butte, he said, about an hour before dark, and the oddities began almost immediately. I will recall here, Steve, as much as I can remember of what Kurt told me, and hope I will recapture most of the details. The one thing I will never forget, however, is watching my big brother tell the story. Kurt was someone who all his life was one of the toughest, most physically fit, and most self-assured lone adventurers I've ever personally known. But as he related these events to me, he became pale, and for lack of a better term, completely shaken, just trying to tell me what happened that night. And I mean that his voice and his person were shaking talking about it. I had never seen my brother like that before or after for the rest of his life. As he unloaded his gear from his truck and set up for the night, he began to hear what he thought were voices from a great distance. Though he did not recognize any language or words, he continued to work, beginning to prepare something to eat. But he kept hearing the voice getting a little louder and nearer. But neither the language nor the words he said got any more distinct or recognizable. I do not recall clearly whether he specified as he recounted this event to me, but I have the impression today that all the voices were male, because I remember him telling me that he thought he perhaps was hearing Native Americans doing a ritual chant of some kind. Thinking something like this, he got up from his camp chair and walked the entire edge of the butte as the sun was setting, trying to spot maybe an encampment of local inhabitants at its base, but saw nothing anywhere below. The chanting continued without stopping, and continued to grow a little louder as the shadows grew longer over the landscape. I cannot recall at what point Kurt really began to get concerned, but I know he sat there trying to eat and also trying to rationalize how this sound could be carrying to him and getting louder, with the words getting without the words getting any more intelligible, and without him being able to see a source of it either below him or approaching him up the road to this bare, treeless butte. At some point in these ponderings, and in his growing unease, he made the decision that he should not stay there after all, especially as the night grew darker, and he still could not identify who or where this garbled chanting, as he said he could only describe it, was coming from. So he broke camp and began to load everything back into his truck. By the time he got everything packed in and was about to get in himself, he said, the chanting was so loud that he thought he should have been able to see these people standing all around him. But there was nothing. And as he opened the door to get in his driver's seat, pulling his keys from his jeans pocket, the chanting suddenly and completely, in a single instant, stopped. He said that scared him badly. It was not, he said, as if a crowd of people came to the end of a song and broke off at roughly the same time. He said it just stopped, like someone had lifted the needle off a record. He said there was no sound. Silence. He got in his truck, started it, and slowly began this series of maneuvers to turn it around on the butte, facing back down the road. But when he put it into drive, for the last time to leave, nothing happened. The engine was running, the tires were spinning, but the truck wouldn't move, as if it was being held in place. He checked his mirrors and saw nothing, but some gravel spitting out behind his truck. He knew there were no rocks or ruts up there that would explain his truck hanging up on something, but it just wouldn't move. At that point, he began to panic. But it got worse. He said that suddenly, the back end of the truck lifted 2 to 3 feet off of the ground, as if something had just picked it up and held it in the air, rendering the drivetrain useless, tilting him forward in the driver's seat against the steering wheel, and throwing his camera and other items off of the seat and onto the passenger side floor. He could see the back of his truck in the air and his driver's side view mirror, getting him nowhere. But there was nothing else there. And there was no noise but that of his truck engine revving at a ridiculous RPM. Then, just as abruptly, the truck dropped, and the next thing he knew, he was fishtailing off the butte and down the road. He kept looking back through his mirrors to see if anything followed, but never saw anything but the dust he was raising, fading in his taillights. And he never went back to that part of the country, and we never talked about it again. Holy shit. I'm in my late 60s now, and my beloved brother left us unexpectedly years after that conversation. I regret deeply that I never brought it up again with him, to let him know I understood, having had still more experiences since that day of things the people running this world don't want us to know about. Though none as dramatic as his, or as some of your other writers' experiences either. But I hope, in honor of my brother, that I will yet relearn the name of that butte and perhaps learn any other experiences that people have had there. I hope your listeners may one day offer a clue. Thanks for all you do, Steve, and to all your audience for listening to what happened to my brother. This is such a strange world, but I do know that God wins. And for me, there's a lot of peace in that. Use my name if you wish or not, doesn't matter. When we speak the truth, does it? Blessings to you and Sarah. Don O. Don, that is quite the frickin' experience your brother had. Sorry they passed early, but I'm super stoked that you got that out and shared with the people. Now I wonder how many people are familiar with maybe possibly something like this happening and where. And if you are, chime in the comment section below this video for Dawn, please. Wouldn't that scare the living shit out of you? The thing that came to mind was those hunters in Nordegg, Alberta. All the camper in the back of the camper got picked up off the ground and shook back and forth like they were in a cardboard box and put back down. 100 years of experience and questions. It's the next email. Appreciate your time, Don. I appreciate your time. Make sure you keep an eye in the comments section below for somebody who might chime in, all right? Hey, Steve. Please don't use our names. Thanks. This may be a rambling book, but here it goes. I was born and raised in Central California, surrounded by kids and grandkids of Okies and Arkies who came to California from the southeast United States during the Great Depression. Excuse me. We were always told / teased by our parents to be home before dark, or the booger man might get you. When we kids talked among ourselves what he looked like, the description related was always the same. Big, tall, dark, hairy, rising out of the tall grass or brush. It wasn't until I was 60 years old that I realized the term had come west with our folks, that Bigfoot was called booger back in the southeast corner of Oklahoma and the northwest corner of Louisiana, where my dad and father-in-law were from. I've never seen one, but I always figured 400 plus years of accounts and native stories had to have a ring of truth to them. I've always thought that the Siaptco of the Pacific Northwest native lore and Grendel of Beowulf sounded like Bigfoot. Beowulf. Beowulf? As a middle schooler, my dad took us to see a movie, quote, The Legend of Boggy Creek, end quote. And that summer we went back to visit Dad's uncle in Oklahoma. We told him about the movie, especially the part where the hunting dogs go out, then come back cowering, refusing to hunt. Uncle Sam replied, That puts me in mind of something that happened to me when I was a school teacher in Folk, Arkansas. He and a friend had gone raccoon hunting in the Sulphur River bottoms one night. They sat by the fire listening to the dogs baying up a scent and waited for them to tree their prey. The dogs went silent and soon came barreling back into camp, tails between their legs, trying to crowd under their camp stools. Between the men and the fire, they couldn't get them to go back out, so gave up and went home. This happened pre-World War I. And Sam was a good Southern storyteller, but this was the only time in my life his story was not followed by a smile, a laugh, or a gotcha. 20 years later, my husband's uncle from Louisiana came out to California visiting and told a very similar story. He'd been hunting in a bayou near the Louisiana-Arkansas border, and his dogs were hot on a trail, then dropped dead quiet. They too came barreling back, cowering, whimpering, and refusing to go back. Fast forward to the 1980s in Shasta County, North Carolina. About 2 miles down the road was a utility right-of-way going up a 2,000-foot elevation rise and following Battle Creek. Frequently at night, about 11 p.m. or later, we would hear a loud wail that sounded like a World War I air raid siren. My dad passed it off as a crazy neighbor down the road, cranking on some old siren he'd found. 5 years later, we heard the Ohio Howl played on a radio show about Bigfoot, and the hair stood up on our necks. It was the same sound. Late 1990s, we knew a family whose daughter was working mop-up on a fire very near where we had lived. I asked if she had seen any big cats, because there are a lot of them there. Her mother said no. They are usually hunting the front of the fire. Easy pickings. But her daughter had looked up in the tall pine to see a monkey looking down at her. I just said it wasn't a monkey, and yes, they are there. 2002 rolls around. Grandma had died, and husband, mother-in-law, and daughter are driving back from clearing things out at their ranch on the Oregon desert. They are at a spot in the big ponderosa pines where the bank rises up from beside the road, and there are overhangs and maybe coves up on the hillside. We're always going to stop and explore them. Glad now we didn't. It's 2 a.m., and just in the headlights, a 10-foot tall, two-legged creature stops along the two-lane highway, looks, shrugs, and steps out to cross the road in front of the car in 3 strides. It's an 18-foot wide highway. 4th stride is across the drainage ditch and up onto the hillside. Hubby drives another mile in stunned silence Before he asks, "Did you see it?" Daughter replies, "You mean the Bigfoot?" She said she had wanted so badly to turn and look as they passed the spot, but was afraid it might be pacing alongside the car, and was frozen in shock. Mother-in-law said, "What did I miss?" She'd been digging in her purse with a small flashlight at the time. "Turn around, go back." Hubby says, "Right, Mom. You think he'll be standing by the road, thumbing a ride? He's long gone." At the time, husband was in construction and was known for his ability to judge height and length to half an inch visually. There is a carved statue of Bigfoot at Mill City, Oregon, that he says is exactly like what he saw, just not massive though. 2003, and we're still clearing out the ranch house. Eldest son goes this time to help. A realtor comes to look at the place over, and as they stand talking, she looks down and gets a serious look on her face. "Do you have Bigfoot problems here? We'll have to tell if you do." My eldest son looks at the huge barefoot track in the soft poof dirt and laughs. "No, I was out here barefoot yesterday." Size 14 feet. There are ranchers 25 miles east of there that have watched Bigfoot Watcher at their alfalfa sprinklers for years. At a family reunion in 2004, husband's cousin strikes up a conversation about Bigfoot. We hadn't told anyone about the sighting, but I always wondered why his cousin had become so interested in the topic years earlier. And it turns out, he and his family had seen the same creature cross the road in the same spot 4 years previous, 2 years before my husband saw it. In the 2000s, 2010. My brother-in-law was scouting deer in the Cascade Mountains of Oregon, just east of Salem. He came up a ridge, peeked over, and saw an entire Bigfoot family. After watching, he crept back down. He returned a few weeks later on and saw them again. This time, the big male realized he was there and screamed at him so loudly it echoed. Brother-in-law was escorted out by the male. When he got to the parking lot, people were standing around wide-eyed trying to figure out what the sound had been. He just put his head down, jumped in his rig, and left. One windy winter night in 2022, the trash can blew over outside my eldest son's house in suburban Tupelo, Mississippi. The streets there are separated by a 5-acre wide swath of forest that can be followed clear back up into the hills. As he and his southern wife were out in the dark trying to clean things up, they heard a scream as loud as a tornado siren down the road. His wife looked at him and asked, "What's that?" Or was that? ? He replied, "You know what that was, a Bigfoot." A few weeks later, he was knocking around on the back patio one night, working on the lawnmower, when he heard a loud whoop from the north in the woods, similar to a gibbon whoop he'd heard at the Memphis Zoo, but louder and not human. The whoop was answered by another whoop from the opposite direction, in the woods near a pond down the road. I've seen those woods, overgrown, and some strange branch weavings way up high in the trees. He laid down the law to his 3 youngsters the next day. No pounding on things or going back in the woods alone. Not long after, they moved 7 miles away. Son likes to barbecue/smoke meat. He smokes the briskets or turkey for family holiday gatherings. His new place backs on a small creek bounded by trees, brush, and pasture land further behind. One day he heard something, quote, heavy, with bipedal footsteps, end quote, stomping back in the brush behind his house as he was barbecuing. When he yelled at it, it stomped away. Recently, as he was out back grilling, an owl hooted in the middle of the day so loudly it echoed off the neighbors' houses across the street repeatedly. But it was an odd-sounding owl. The son has decided it's the smell of meat cooking that draws whatever it is. He's also made up his mind that if he rounds the corner of the house to find Bigfoot checking out his grill, he'll just say, "You can have it. I'm going back inside to order pizza." My youngest son enjoys camping and fishing in the Central Oregon Cascades, but refuses to camp at Cultus Lake. He was in a cafe one day when a young couple came in, white-faced, trying to calm down. They had camped the previous night at Cultus, only to be awakened by heavy footsteps and gorilla sounds circling their tent for hours. I work in an elementary school. Twice kids have asked me if Bigfoot was real, and I tell them calmly that yes, they are in the woods, but rare. I'm not going to call my family liars. As for the questions, you are familiar with wildlife. How big a home range do you think a group of Bigfoot have? We wonder if the ones from Tupelo have followed my son's family. Do you think they hibernate or migrate? I've noticed the huge wildfires of the past few summers. I've noticed the huge wildfires of the past few summers all happen in prime Bigfoot habitat and sightings areas. An attempt to drive them out? I doubt the government will ever officially acknowledge them. Too many environmental and economic impacts on logging, mining, recreation, restrictions on area entry. And thanks for bringing so much to light. We love your videos. Keep up the good work. End of email. And that's a lot. Do I think they migrate? A lot of people say they do. Oh, they migrate and they follow power lines because it's easier. Do I think they migrate myself? Nope. No, I don't. That's just me. I don't think so because speaking with my native friends in Mount Currie, where I was previously living, when I was intentionally looking for these wild people, are they wild? Reclusive people, they said they're there year-round. Year-round. And we were talking snow load there. They're there year-round. I've seen the tracks myself, minus 30 on Duffy Lake. What else? I've had trees being wailed on when I was trapping wolves in February. Found my arrow was placed on that road in front of me out of thin air. No prints in the snow. That was in February. They're there in the summertime, springtime. Do I think they're here full time? I think there's something going on alongside us full time that we can't see and we get glimpses of. That's what I think. Something is existing parallel to us simple humans that we just cannot pick up clearly yet. But we're getting there. I think a lot of people have picked up on it and figured it out. The quantum topic is right up there with that and seems to hold a lot of water, that one. Yeah. Will they follow your family? What the patterns that we have here is, for the most part, most people that have visual experiences, they seem to tend to have them again through life. Not all the time, sometimes 10 years apart plus, but they still have them. It seems that the people who have the experiences have more than one, on average. Not everyone, but a lot, right? Me included. Didn't ask for it. Don't look for it. Still happens. Why? Don't know. Is it when we are possibly vibrating on the right frequency physically that allows us to become aware of what may be around us all the time? We just don't know it? Maybe. Maybe. There you go. Nope, I don't think they migrate. I don't think so. They don't need to follow food around. I don't think so. Now, I appreciate your spending that time to send that in to us. I really, 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 really appreciate that. This next email has no subject title. Good evening, Steve of the Round Table. I'm sending this email concerning the sighting at Fort Drum in the late 90s. This isn't a first-hand sighting, but my light infantry unit would consistently see the usual footprints. Seeing Sabe during nighttime guard shifts with our night vision goggles. And oh yeah, to cap it off, excuse me, my email to you, the big F-Tard Research Organization. Also feel free to use my name. Chris from Derry, New Hampshire. Thanks for chiming in, Chris. I wonder how many of those men and women are following this channel. I wonder how many. There is a lot of people in the military who know. A lot. And they don't know because it's a secret share of them. They know because they saw. That's how they know. Who's next? It is titled Being Watched. Hi, Steve. One of your witness contributors reminded me of this but I've resisted writing and admitting this until now. Okay. When I was young and living in an area that was inhabited by something I had yet to see, I was wandering alone in a very overlooked area and noticed a bird dangling in a hawthorn tree high up about 10 feet. It was a black bird caught in fishing line 50 meters from the river. So I set about releasing the blackbird that was still alive from its trap. Okay, I think there's 2 periods in this. So we're lacking punctuation, but we'll get through it. Climbing up in the branches of the hawthorn tree was very painful, as you can imagine. I think I had some help from a gate post as I climbed up and began to release the bird that was hopelessly entangled. I became aware that I was being watched, but ignored that feeling as there was nobody around, and carried on until eventually the bird was released and flew away. All the time, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, and when I finally got down to the ground, turned to face the direction that I had the feeling of being watched, and punched the air to show my achievement, so sure was I that there was something there watching me, and in return I felt their relief. But there was nothing to see. I was just addressing the trees on the far side of a river. Now I know they had also been trying to free the bird as it was morning. So when I came along, their interest was strongly projected. That was early on in my contact with them. It's always been strange to me how they project their thoughts, but as much as I want to deny this on the grounds of rationality, it is, however, undeniable, but impossible to provide evidence for. So, I will ask you to believe me. They can project their thoughts. Agreed. I must have become used to this feeling. As I was often in this area, it was my favorite place to go. Sometimes it felt as though they were gone because there was no communication. Eventually, after a few years, it became evident that they were still there, but had moved to a more private and secure presence, so they could turn off the communication at will. This feeling was backed up with sightings, and the same level of shyness was observed in a youngster that would only come out at low light levels, evening and nighttime. Even then was hidden with just the head showing. Over many years, this shyness slowly gave way to a more conspicuous presence. Without going into details, there was physical contact, which left a strong, nasty smell on my skin or clothing. Then something would happen, and they would return to an inconspicuous presence. Looking back on this behavior reminds me very much of how the birds in my back garden behave. Shy, skittish behavior, contrasted with behavior when raising young, when they became more visible and interact more. I'm not one of those who believe these creatures are capable of leaving this reality. From everything I've witnessed, they exist at a very basic level, hiding constantly. With all the contact I had, one thing became a sad reality. Others were mostly unaware and could not conceive of such a creature until one day when they were initiated. It drove a wedge between us. They were suspicious of me, and I was afraid they would cause trouble for them. There was also trauma in the contact, something my friends had avoided through their ignorance. It has taken many years to come to terms with the trauma I suffered. It was not just the shocking nature of meeting something so wild, but also the strangeness. The behavior was strange. As an adult, that feeling of being watched that I had been accustomed to as a child was absent, until one day walking in an adjoining wood, and the direction was from a place inaccessible and high ground. It was a good feeling that had been lost to me for so long. I knew not to linger too long and avoided the temptation to climb up toward this communication. But then, close encounters without any feeling of a presence. This suggests not all of them have that ability. A few years ago, one of my daughters came to me excited and described having a conversation with another person who was 30 feet away without using words. It must be a hereditary trait. My love for science and logic makes this a difficult admission to make. Please be kind. Thanks, Steve. there you go. Interesting. Very interesting. There isn't a doubt about it. They can project their feelings or emotions and words. Not a doubt about it. Not a doubt about it. I was first aware of that, or I was suspicious of it, years ago. God, we're talking over frickin', I don't know, 25 years ago. Ooh, even 30. When I met that man with Dr. John Bendernagel. I met that man who said flat out that all of a sudden, when this thing's standing there right in front of him, 30 yards away or something in the timber, he was hunting, had a rifle, and he said that all of a sudden he said the expression on his face was absolute surprise looking at him. And he said that all of a sudden he had this overwhelming, flooding feeling of calm. Just hit him. Like everything's going to be okay. Weird, right? And that was the very first time I became aware of, huh? It sent you a feeling? That was the very first time for me. And since then, how much shit have we heard from people around the globe that have had all of this happen? Feelings, physical feelings from hearing sound, but feelings, emotions, dread, trauma, being watched, turn around and leave, you're going to die, don't go this way, don't do it when you're about to raise your gun and point it at one, don't do it without moving their mouth. Hits you between the ears in your head. Pretty weird, right? Anyway, oh man, I didn't sleep too good last night, don't know why. But I gotta get my butt in gear. I gotta get organized, and I gotta shave the shit off my face. I don't know how you guys who grow beards do it. I can't stand this shit, but I hate shaving. And Sarah always wants me to have stupid whiskers, and I don't. So I shave when it drives me nuts, which is right about now, and then I don't shave until it goes back to where this stage of the game. But there's no way I'm leaving this shit on my face in this heat and going fishing now for a week. I feel sorry for you poor bastards out there that could grow a frickin' beard overnight in your sleep, you hairy bastards. I don't know how you do it. Survive. But the guys that wear a beard in this weather? Ugh. But anyway, I'm gonna get ripping. Lots to think about. What's amazing to me at this stage of the game too is just how many people. Who would ever have guessed in a million years this shit would happen here, right? I was just promoting outdoors and conservation, hunting and fishing skills. That's all I was doing. And all of a sudden all this shit happened, right? Who would have thought? Every single day somebody's coming forward, finding us here on their own, because that's the only way you can do it, is by word of mouth, right? By word of mouth. And then listening, and then going, holy shit, no way. All those people are here. Wow. I'm going to share my shit too. Isn't it crazy? Every single day. For what? I haven't looked myself, but somebody said, I keep hearing 5 years. 5 years? 5 effing years. Of as many days as I can to make sure everybody gets heard of emails. Whew. Wow. That is one hell of an effort put forth to keep this topic a joke, isn't it? What an amazing effort. As consistent as I've been to make sure that every single person gets heard, the dark side has been just as or more consistent in maintaining the topic as being a joke. Crazy, right? You gotta admit, that is freaking impressive. Right? How I bet that's the way it is across the board with many topics in society today, though, right? Many topics. You can pick quite a few, especially ongoing today, of in your face, yet deny pulling off blatant crimes against humanity and the same time denying on the same lens. Unbelievable how we are built and how susceptible we are to just sitting there like a window licker doing nothing for so many different topics. But anyways, I'll bite my lip because obviously I could get ripping on that. So there you go. Here we go. 100%. You won't be hearing from me from inside here for a while. Sarah's still away. That's why I still have these in my desk. These are good. Get your decals. Get them while they're hot. Links below. More importantly, share your experience or your knowledge, all right? Share your truth, no matter what. get it to me. Links below. And make sure you do what you love to do. All right? Please, please, please. If anything you get out of this is encouragement to do what you frickin' love to do. And if you haven't figured out what you love to do yet, figure it out. Go find it. That's why we're alive. All right? Make sure you do what you love to do this weekend. I'll be back.